I absolutely despised the World Cup 2026 branding when I first saw it. I saw it and I was like, this is absolute trash. Why such a big and broad association company? Call it what you want. Would decide to go with something like this. It's incredible to me. But then I don't know. A month and a half went by, finals on Sunday, and suddenly I find myself loving it. And I was like, I don't know. They obviously did something right, so it has to be me. And same thing happened with the song, actually. Now that I think about it, like same thing happened with the Shakira song "Die Die" with Burna Boy. I first heard it, no me gustó. I hated it. I was like, this is terrible, especially in comparison to whatever's been done in the past. And in the case of Shakira, Waka Waka. But then I listened to it, and I love it. And I don't know if it's because it's attached to a good performing World Cup. There's been so many amazing things happening in this World Cup that I don't know if it has anything to do with that. But then, luckily for me, I got my hands on the branding guidelines, and let me tell you, en verdad, it's one of the best freaking brandings I've ever seen, and it's actually genius, and I love it. And there's a reason why I love it. So, even though I hated the World Cup 2026 branding when I first saw it, I'm here to convince you and to show you that it's actually genius and why you should love it. Okay, so obviously the first thing we gotta look at is the history, because I feel like that's the biggest debate. Like when you first see the logo, and even after you've seen it for a while, when you see it, you're like, bro, like, look at all these previous logos and look how freaking cool they look compared to this. I don't know. It just kind of like seemed very bland and lackluster to me, which is, I think, everyone's biggest thing. It's just not fun to look at. But there's a reason as to why that is. When you see the branding in action, I feel like that's where the fun comes in. But let's go back to history. If you look at the last 50 years, I feel like there's also like a shift focus happening here. West Germany 74, Argentina 78, Spain 82, Mexico 86, Italia 90, USA 94, and France 98. All of those World Cup, the branding shifted around the same thing, which is the soccer ball, the football. Every single branding revolved around making that the star. Because obviously it's the football World Cup, the soccer World Cup. But then the trophy of the freaking World Cup became so iconic that in Korea, Japan 2002, they started making that the main element. And if you look closely, the logo, it's actually a simple design rendition of that. And that kind of like became its own thing. And if you look at Germany and South Africa 2010, they both utilized that same simple line design version of the trophy itself. So the most sought after thing in this competition became kind of like its own thing. It's almost like, think about it like this. It's almost like the NFL logo becoming the Lombardi trophy, which they are synonymous to each other, but the NFL logo has become its own thing. It's instantly recognizable. The World Cup trophy, it's so iconic that they shifted, instead of it being about the soccer ball, they made it around the trophy. But then, I think this is where it gets a little bit interesting. If you look at Brazil 2014, Russia 2018, and Qatar 2022, they grabbed the trophy and they reinterpreted it within the same culture of where the World Cup was happening. In Brazil, it's hands of people coming together to form the trophy. In 2018 in Russia, I think this is supposed to depict a matrushka, which is those little toys, I guess, or like the little bobbleheads that kind of like stack on top of each other. And in the case of the 2018, even though it doesn't necessarily look like the trophy, I think the shape kind of like resembles it, and I think this is supposed to depict a burqa, but I'm not sure. If you know, let me know down in the comments. But again, look at all these logos and look at how much color all of these logos have. They are very vibrant, they're very identifiable, they're iconic. But then you look at the 2026 logo and it's just so bland. It's black and white. It has a PNG thrown on top of it of the actual cup. It just seemed very lackluster and low effort till I dove a little bit deeper and I actually understood why I liked it. And one of the main reasons why I liked it, it's because you're not just seeing an image, you're seeing the branding take life. And I think the best example of this I could give you, it's like the animations that you see as the game is about to start. These animations are very colorful and very dynamic and very inclusive. Let's just put it like that. It's not something that just feels like one thing. It feels like a lot of things happening at the same time. And the most important thing, it's always the focus, which is the World Cup trophy. I think it's one of the World Cup logos that works the best because it works for what it needs to work. And it's also tackling something that it's so difficult to do, which is representing this multicultural event that's being held in 3 different countries with one simple mark. Now that I think about it, it's not just creating a branding for a World Cup that will take place in 3 different countries. It's also 3 different languages. So it's so interesting and so genius, actually, that in our day and age where there's an infinite amount of media being put out daily, instead of doing something super loud, let's just say, they decided to go with something a lot more contained but bold, something that would stand out in this moment where everything is just exacerbated. They went with something much more elegant and simplistic, let's call it. And I think, honestly, I think that's why it works. That being said, W Public Address, that's the studio that designed this branding. I'm sure there's bunch of other collaborators in this project, but I think they're the main studio, so W Public Address. They were tasked with something so complex and so difficult that if you take a closer look, it's actually genius. So let's look at what they put in the branding guidelines and why this works. The first thing I want to point out, it's kind of like their introduction to the project. They have a few different things that I find interesting that kind of like connect this branding together. The intro, event facts, the truth, a world less and less harmonious, and the opportunity, which is a new way to bring the world together. I found interesting that they based all of it in 4 pillars. Football is for all, inclusivity, soccer meets football, the clashing or the unity of cultures, if you think about it, a new World Cup for a new era, the change of pace, specifically when it comes to the branding, but in the way we consume the World Cup, where, I don't know, we have people like speed streaming in the game, which is something unprecedented, obviously, and a canvas made up of many identities. Again, similar to soccer meets football, where instead of it being opposite, it's what brings us together, regardless of whether you call it soccer, football, or... The manifesto, we have seen it in the branding elements. It's We Are 26, but there's different versions of it that I had never read, and I thought they were very interesting, and the copywriter actually did a great job. So the short one, it's We Are 26, and then the medium one, it's Welcome to our biggest moment in history. It's our chance to shine, so bring your style and your individuality. Bring your game to the beautiful game. United as individuals, united as billions, we all play together. We are 26. If you look at the previous brandings, they were all based in, like, I don't know, a very small palette. Again, something very recognizable that for the most part stemmed from the country's flag or the country's iconic colors. But since we're dealing with 3 different countries, they had to essentially take a range of colors from each flag. So if you look at the core assets, we have the official emblem, which we'll get to in a minute. We have the official look, which is, if you break it down, it's very simple. It's basically an overstack of a 2 and then 2 6s stacked on top of each other. And this is what they use mostly for like backgrounds and ID cards or anything like that. The tournament device, which honestly, I had never heard of that term. I don't really know what that is, but it's essentially the 26 with all the colors. We have the We Are 26 logo, which is the slogan, but it has this exact same stack as the actual emblem logo. We have the typeface, which is Nota Sans, and then we have the actual FIFA World Cup 26 word mark. But then if you look at the color pattern, I think this is where things start getting interesting, since the World Cup takes place in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Again, they had to work in a range of colors, and you could see it very clearly here. The odd man out here, it's the purple, but again, Canada, red, obviously, US, blue, and then you have Mexico with the green. And the reason why they have the purple is so they could use it almost like as an accent color because it's almost a transitional color between the red and the blue. Obviously, the beauty of having such a simple logo with the 26 and the World Cup on top, it's that you can punch through the 26 because it's just basically a black box. And you can punch textures or anything through it. And that's the opportunity that FIFA, or in this case, the agency who designed this, they use that opportunity to showcase the different countries in which the World Cup was taking place. So if you look at the core assets, I think that's where it's very apparent. And we can have the culture kind of like shine through the different versions of the logo, even though these are not official logos. This is kind of like the emblems that each host country has used, and if you've seen games in those specific countries, you'll see that these are being used when they introduce the stadium or when you read that where the game is taking place, whether it's Ontario, Canada, or I don't know, Monterrey, Mexico. So there's a little bit of everything, and obviously these all stem from the flag. These are basic patterns. The Canada has the leaf, obviously. In Mexico, I think this is the most interesting one because they're mixing multiple things. They're mixing both culture and the flag because you obviously have the eagle. But if you zoom out a little bit, you see that this is like a trina as well, which is one of those skull candies that are very iconic to Mexico. And then again, the US one, it's a little bit more on the simplistic side, but it's obviously the stars and stripes of the flag. To the main event, the design story of the actual logo. So you'll see it here. It's broken down into multiple elements. You have the core geometry, which is what builds the 26. And again, I already said it, but this is so important. I feel like the reason why this is so clutch, it's because since it's such a big blob, I guess, it allows you to display anything behind it. And since the World Cup trophy, it's gold, it's very difficult for it to clash with something when it's over any color, basically. So you have the black and white colors of the 26. You have the core geometry, which is the curvature and the straight lines of the actual 26. You have the silhouette punched through, which is the trophy, and then you have the actual 3D object. And the 3D object is interesting because you don't really see that ever in an actual branding. It might be an element, but not the main one. Not the main branding. It never revolves around pixels. But we'll get to that in a minute. So let's see what they have for introduction. And honestly, this is the part where I was sold on the branding because I read it and I was like, well, I mean, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So introduction, the trophy, one of the most sought after objects in the world and the centerpiece of our emblem. Not in an abstracted or cartoonish form, but in an ultra realistic expression that it's true to the sculptural quality of the trophy itself. The most sought after thing in the competition and in the sport, and one of the most recognizable trophies in the world, and one of the most beautiful ones too. It's such an iconic thing. If you ask me, I feel like that in itself should be the FIFA logo, just the trophy, or the World Cup logo. You don't need anything else but that. So utilizing that, I think it's the smartest thing you could do. The 26. The emblem makes the year of the event the setting for the trophy. Big, bold, and iconic without distracting from the World Cup. Black, white, and gold. The restrained color palette, it's designed to let the trophy shine. Literally what I just said. The simplicity, elegance, and boldness of the black and white serves as a balance to the ultra-expressive, ultra-realistic colors of each host city and trophy that are brought together to the brand. The shades. The use of squares and quarter circles gives the mark a timeless simplicity with subtle references to the squared edges of the pitch and the circle of the ball. Yeah, I mean, that sounds a little bit of a stretch, but sure. The starting point for the brand design was the year 2026, composed on 48 units to represent the 48 nations who will compete. It's actually genius. That's actually genius. I had not seen that. So if you look at the OG logo, which is just the 2026, that 2026, it's made out of 48 squares or 48 pieces, 48, I don't know what they call it here, units. And those 48 units represent each country that partook in the World Cup this year. That's actually genius. I know this is one of those things that, you know, the common folk or just people like your average Joe would never see this. But for people who are into design and branding, this is actually so sick. Aside from having this hyper realistic version of the logo, they also have like a line art for specific applications. When it comes to branding, for the most part, whether it's a restaurant brand or whatever it might be, you don't want to go with images or with something that's super hyper realistic, even if it's vector. But when it comes to applicating that to different mediums, it's honestly a headache. If you're trying to do, I don't know, like a cutout into like a stencil, you will never be able to do that. Or if you're trying to like burn it into like, I don't know, like a plaque of silver or whatever, it will never do that. And that's why, aside from having the hyper realistic version, they also have the line art version, which honestly, before opening this document, I don't think I've seen it on anything in this World Cup, but they state here that one of the reasons why they did it, it's so they could have applications on it if they were embroidering, if they were embossing or debossing, or engraving it into, again, something like metal. Another part of the emblem where they talk about the trophy, it says, the FIFA World Cup trophy can be used as a powerful standalone hero element, catching everyone's attention immediately, which is what I just said. Not only the trophy has the name of the event at the bottom, it's also such an iconic thing, and it's also made out of gold, so it stands out immediately. It doesn't matter where you put it. So I feel like having the trophy be its own thing, being its like main branding thing, I think it's so genius. Again, NFL is a really good example of this, or something like the Stanley Cup. So having that approach to something so complicated as representing 3 different countries, I think it's genius. And then we go to like the individual applications per country, and honestly, it is so difficult for this to work, but somehow it works. Like if you look at, again, the Canada version of the logo, if you look at the Mexico version of the logo, or you look at the USA version of the logo, it looks like a continuous branding. It looks like it's all part of the same thing, which again, it's something so difficult to do because you're representing 3 different nations, 3 different flags, 3 different, I don't know, type of people, ethnicities, languages, everything is different about them. And they're all feeling like it's part of the same thing, same tournament. And I mean, I don't know, just standing ovation to the designers because, again, tasked with an almost impossible task. And now that we've seen that, another thing that I do want to mention, it's the animation and the use of color. Having such a broad range of colors, again, even though it's kind of like withheld, it's pretty broad because you're covering 3 different flags. When it comes to animation, I feel like that's where the branding truly comes alive. Because if you look at these animations, there's just so much burst of color that it makes it feel inclusive. It makes you feel like you want to be a part of it. It makes it look fun, which I feel like it's something that gets lost in sports, especially in extremely highly competitive sports. I feel like it's really easy to kind of like veer the attention from one side to the other, and honestly, it really is all about the fans. And this amount of color, this burst of movement, this focus on the trophy, the most sought after, the inclusivity of it all makes it feel like the fans are the main focus. And I think that's why they focus so heavily in the We Are 26, because it's not about one country, it's not about one person, it's not about one superstar. It's about us, the people who love the beautiful game, the people who have come together to appreciate this. So honestly, low-key, one of my favorite things, the animations. It's just so beautiful to see how it all kind of like comes together, and it all feels like a celebration because you're going through all these different flags in one swipe, and it's just very dynamic. Kudos to the designers and the creative directors and everyone who put this together. You guys cooked, and this is genius. So if you don't know about me, my name is Gara. Sub up, like up, you already know what to do. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this. If you want me to do any other breakdowns on branding, let me know. I'll be more than happy to do so. I love you guys. Sub up, like up, follow me everywhere. I love you.